Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Current, the North Central Region Water Network Speed Networking webinar series. My name is Eugene Bragg, and I am with Ohio State University Extension. I will be your moderator today. Since some of you may be new to the North Central Region Water Network, we are an extension-led collaboration among 12 universities and our partners in 12 upper Midwestern states. We work together to ensure safe and sufficient water supplies by increasing the scope and positive impact of multi-state water outreach and research efforts in the North Central region of the United States. Today's topic we'll be covering is state water quality initiatives. We're going to be doing a bit of a round robin today. We have 3 different state-funded water quality initiatives from across the region. We have excellent presenters on these 3 different initiatives, and I'm excited to get going. Before we get into the presentations, however, I want to give you a few notes on today's logistics. If you have questions for our presenters, please submit those questions using the Q&A panel. There will be a dedicated Q&A session following the last presentation. The Q&A panel can be found with the Q&A icon at the bottom of your webinar screen. We will take as many questions as we have time for, and we will answer those questions that have been upvoted by fellow attendees first. So if you see a question that particularly resonates with you, be certain to upvote it. We will address those questions in order of their popularity, but we almost certainly won't be able to get to all of them. If you're experiencing technical issues or have questions about the North Central Region Water Network or the current webinar series, please use the chat feature. We don't use the chat to ask questions of presenters, but other discussions can happen there if you see fit. The chat feature is accessible via the chat icon at the bottom of your webinar screen. A phone-in option can be accessed by clicking the up arrow on the mute icon and clicking switch to phone audio. This session will be recorded and will be available at northcentralwater.org. Before we introduce today's speaker, just because I am a substitute, I've been asked to introduce myself. I am sitting in for Rebecca Power, who normally moderates these webinars, but is unavailable today. My name's Eugene Bragg. In addition to serving as a member of the North Central Region Water Network Leadership Team, I am the Program Director for Aquatic Ecosystems Extension with Ohio State University. I'm the statewide pond specialist in essence, although I do much more than just ponds. I'm also the current president of the Water Management Association of Ohio and do lots of other watery stuff. I like the water. I also happen to like fish. So we are excited to feature 3 excellent presenters today. First will be Paul Gardner, who is with Clean Water Council of Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. We will also have Eric Sass with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources H2O HIO program. And finally, we will have Stacey Minson with Kansas State Research and Extension. First off, let's hear from Paul Gardner. He's the administrator of the Clean Water Council, a Minnesota state advisory council that recommends how to use the Clean Water Fund to the governor and legislature on the implementation of the state's Clean Water Legacy Act. You can read more about Paul here on this slide, but without further ado, because I want to make sure we get in as much of these presentations as we possibly can, let's hear from Paul. Are you ready, Paul?
I am indeed. So let's see, I may share now. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Paul Gardner. I'm the administrator for the Clean Water Council in Minnesota. Technically, I am an employee of the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, but I was hired from the outside, in particular, to head up the Clean Water Council. So let's see. Let me move all you people. I was asked today to talk about the Clean Water Fund in the state of Minnesota and how we're using that to improve water quality in the state. It's in case you have barking dogs at the FedEx guy or the Amazon Prime delivery person or kids running around or have to snooze, here are the main points I'd like to leave you with. One is that the Clean Water Fund is a dedicated source of funding that allows us to pinpoint where to deploy other funding instead of just guessing, which allows us to be more precise. We're able to not only just develop plans for what to do to improve our water quality, we actually have money to fulfill the plans, or most of them. Something that we often don't talk about very much is that the Clean Water Fund is used to empower and persuade Minnesotans to make the right choice for water quality. We do have a lot of technical and financial assistance available, but unless people are persuaded to accept it, it doesn't really mean anything. Finally, we have the funding to be able to measure progress to see whether the projects we are deploying are actually working. And we're very fortunate to have 25 years of steady funding to be able to do this. And we'll be at the halfway point in December of 2021, in just a few months, for that 25-year period. Just a quick thing about the Minnesota Clean Water Council. It was set up in 2006 by state statute to advise the governor and the legislature on the Clean Water Legacy Act, which has to deal with impairments in our water. We have 17 voting members appointed by the governor from the diverse group of interests that you see on the right. On the left, you see the agencies that essentially use the money, and all but the Public Facilities Authority are also on the council in a non-voting capacity. And we also have 4 state legislators on the council as well. One of our most critical duties is to every 2 years recommend how to spend the Clean Water Fund. And here's what it is. In 2008, during the middle of the greatest recession since World War II, the voters of Minnesota, by a fairly wide margin, approved a constitutional amendment to raise their taxes by 3/8%. The logo to denote the Clean Water Land and Legacy Amendment is to the right. 33% of that amendment funding can be used for clean water. We're noted by the blue stripe on the logo on the right, and then the other money goes to our habitat, arts and cultural heritage, and parks and trails. When it comes to clean water, there are restrictions on how we may use the money. It can only protect, enhance, and restore water quality and protect groundwater from degradation. And we do have to spend at least 5% of the Clean Water Fund to protect drinking water sources. Very importantly, we cannot supplant existing funds with this money. It has to be over and above what we have been spending. So we say we have to supplement and not supplant. Since 2010, when the money started coming in through the most recent biennial budget just approved 2 months ago, more than $1.3 billion has been appropriated to the Clean Water Fund. The money expires in 2034, and we're halfway there. I was going to break down the rest of the presentation into 2 parts: surface waters and drinking water. The Clean Water Fund allows us to fulfill our need to have intensive monitoring in all of the 80 Huck 8 watersheds in the state. That comprehensive monitoring is directed by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. There's assessment work of our fish and geological atlases and the like done by other entities. But everybody is chipping in, and we're able to do that intensive monitoring for roughly 8 of those 8 major watersheds every year. And so we finished the first round of a 10-year cycle in 2019. Then based on that science, the MPCA puts together what I call a blueprint for improvement. It's called the Watershed Restoration Protection Strategy, or a RAPS. The map on the right shows you that we're almost done doing all the RAPS. It's essentially a to-do list based on all the science of everything we need to do to accomplish our water quality goals in Minnesota. Then to have local buy-in and participation, local stakeholders assemble a comprehensive watershed management plan with grants from the Board of Water and Soil Resources, using the Clean Water Fund to figure out from the science which projects ought to get done first and have the highest priority, such as recreational lakes in a particular watershed, as an example. What's great about the Clean Water Fund is once the plan is done, we actually have money to fund the projects that are in the plans. We can't fund all of them, and some of them have to be done by either a landowner or we can leverage federal money, but we actually know what needs to be done to get to where we need to go. And then finally, the fund allows us to actually monitor to see if those projects are working. So everything on the left there is actually funded almost entirely by the Clean Water Fund. here's an example of what we get. Each of these watershed management plans based on the RAPS has a master table similar to this, which is based on lots of sub-watershed results. But I show this to legislators a lot just so they're completely clear on, what we're doing. We know that if we do a certain number of activities in the categories on the left by a year certain and defined there, we are likely to get reductions mostly in nutrients by the desired amount to hit our water quality goals. And we generally know what it's going to cost to do. Now, obviously, those figures are always going to change over time, but we at least have an idea of what direction we're going. When it comes to drinking water, we actually are spending 4 times more than we're required to protect drinking water sources. We do that with surface water and community groundwater systems. We have 23 surface water systems in Minnesota and 920 community groundwater systems. These are usually municipal water utilities. The Clean Water Fund has helped pay for monitoring, assessment, characterization, things like geological atlases and groundwater atlases, health-based guidance done by the Minnesota Department of Health for contaminants of emerging concern that have been detected in Minnesota and are possibly a risk. And then the state of Minnesota puts together a drinking water supply protection area, or a DWISMA, as an area around a wellhead, not just the wellhead itself or an emergency response area, but the area around the wellhead in all those 920 systems where something on the surface could travel and get in the well within 10 years. The great thing about the Clean Water Fund, after paying for all those activities, is that we actually plan through 2034 to fund half of the activities that are in the plan. Finally, the Minnesota Department of Agriculture has had a nitrogen fertilizer management plan, which fits into our nutrient reduction strategy. That has resulted in a new rule that went into place about 1.5 years ago, where we identify communities that have nitrogen levels that are too high, and there's a triage effect of what type of aggressive intervention we would have using all the tools that we have, from conservation easements to direct engagement with landowners to look at cover crops and sticking to nitrogen guidelines. And we also have a certification program for water quality certified farms, which is a good proxy for best practices. So we have a lot of tools, again, all of which are paid for the Clean Water Fund to get people safe water. And all of that requires a lot of interagency collaboration with all of those agencies that I mentioned before. I think that I have just a few seconds left, and so I will stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And a quick reminder that if you have any questions for Paul, please do enter them in the Q&A box. So next, we will hear, Paul, can you unshare your screen?
Certainly. There we go.
Thank you, Paul. Next, we will hear from Eric Sauce. Eric Sauce is the H2 Ohio Program Manager with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. The H2 Ohio initiative is Governor Mike DeWine's multi-agency collaborative water quality effort to ensure safe, clean water for all Ohioans. ODNR's role within H2 Ohio is to restore wetland ecosystems and natural capacity to reduce surface water pollution. You can read more about Eric on this very slide, but I want to get right on with Eric's presentation, so let's do so. If you are ready, Eric, please share your screen.
Sounds good. Thanks, Eugene. Let me get that going here for a second. All right, are you seeing that?
Looks good, Eric.
Thanks. Well, thanks everyone for having me today, and it's nice to be with you. They've told me to limit it to 10 minutes. I could talk about our H2 Ohio program at the Ohio Department of Natural Resources all day because I love what we're doing so much, but I will try to rein myself in. I like where Paul left off talking about interagency collaboration, because that is really the core and the power of what we're doing in Ohio with our H2 Ohio initiative. So this is the initiative of Mike DeWine's administration, and the vision is clean, safe water for Ohioans. And the way we do that is by working together in a collaborative effort, aligning the mission of various state agencies together with that singular goal of ensuring clean, safe water. I want to talk a little bit about the broad H2 Ohio effort and then dial into the specific approach and role of the Ohio Department of Natural Resources in the H2 Ohio effort. So the Ohio Department of Agriculture, they focus on keeping nutrients on the farm field, feeding crops where they belong by incentivizing voluntary nutrient management planning, cover crops, manure incorporation, other best management practices to address nutrient loading that fuels annual harmful algae blooms. And then the Ohio EPA has a separate role within this H2 Ohio program to promote water and wastewater infrastructure, fix failing home septic treatment systems, and replace lead service lines to child care centers. ODNR's approach is taking that infrastructure angle and applying a natural infrastructure approach. So we look at primarily wetland restoration, floodplain reconnection, enhancing the hydraulic connectivity of diked coastal marshes. And this is a cost-effective, long-term approach that conveys additional benefits to wildlife and society. There's about 100 reasons why the Ohio Department of Natural Resources likes wetland restoration. If you're a bird watcher or a duck hunter or a kayaker. But within our H2 Ohio program, we look at where that type of habitat restoration overlaps with nutrient management. So where we lock arms with the Ohio Department of Agriculture, they're promoting cover crops and manure incorporation. We're building wetland habitat to intercept nutrient-laden surface water and filter out the phosphorus, denitrify, and create better water quality as it moves downstream. So that's kind of our conceptual framework there. We launched this program in 2019 with, for the entire biennium, for the multi-agency approach, $172 million of general revenue fund. For the Ohio Department of Natural Resources in the first biennium, we had $65 million worth of funding to implement our wetland restoration approach. And you can see on this map here that our geographic approach is largely focused on the western basin of Lake Erie, the northwest corner of Ohio there. That's where our project work is concentrated. But we also recognize that unfortunately across the state of Ohio, we have additional areas where there are water quality needs. Some of our inland lakes have similar harmful algae bloom issues on an annual basis, fueled by nutrient loading. So we have project work that focuses more broadly as well. And we're making progress. In between the lines with Ohio EPA and ODA and ODNR is a sense of urgency to address this problem. We have currently around 60 projects that we've funded, and 11 of those are fully complete at this point, kicking off back in 2020. So we're making great progress. We're cutting ribbons on some of these projects already. And here's our dashboard that talks about kind of where we are right now with our program. 59 projects, $64.5 million in funding. And we've taken $5 million of that funding and incentivized enrollment in Lake Erie Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program, federal program. We've taken some H2 Ohio funding and added that in as icing on the cake to incentivize enrollment in specific conservation practices that we feel will have a staying power on the landscape. Forested riparian buffers or wetland restoration. And we do this work with the assistance of our nonprofit conservation partners. We take our H2 Ohio funds and we create a grant award agreement, develop a scope of work with an NGO or a municipality, Ducks Unlimited, Nature Conservancy, Black Swamp Conservancy, local parks districts and soil and water conservation districts. They're the ones who are the project managers who make this implementation happen. And to date, we have within those 59 projects, around 8,400 acres of wetlands that are restored, created, or enhanced, filtering 104,000 acres of watershed. And in the buffer of these wetland projects, we have over 20,000 trees that we've put in place. So as we move forward, what's important for us is to make a difference and hold ourselves accountable for the water quality impact that we're having with wetland restoration projects on the landscape. So to that end, we have engaged with the Lake Erie Aquatic Research Network. And this is an academic consortium of wetland and water quality experts, mostly in Northwest Ohio. And we tasked them with developing a monitoring program and then a site-specific monitoring plan to assess the water quality impacts of each one of our wetland projects. They've developed that plan now, and they're starting to monitor the first of our projects as we speak. We look forward to finding out what works well, what needs improvement, and feeding that information back into our decision-making process at the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. So I will leave it at that and make sure we have time for our other panelists. Thank you for your time today. Here's some contact information.
Excellent. Thank you, Eric. And do you mind unsharing your screen now? Finally, it's time to introduce Stacey Minson. Stacey earned her bachelor degree in animal science and industry from Kansas State University in 1995. She currently serves as a Kansas State Big Creek Middle Smoky Hill River watershed specialist and has held this position since 2003. She's charged with developing, writing, and implementing an EPA-approved 9-element watershed plan to address water quality issues and TMDLs, which is total maximum daily loads for those not in the know in Canopolis Reservoir. How did I do, Stacey, with that?
You're fine.
Fantastic. You can read lots more about what Stacey does, and she does lots. But once again, I'm eager to hear what Stacey has to say instead of prattling. So Stacey, please share your screen. I'm eager to hear it.
If I can get my mouse to find it. There we go. Is it there?
It is there, but I'm not seeing the presentation mode yet. So go ahead and call that up.
Is it where it's supposed to be?
It looks good.
Okay. Hello, I'm Stacey Minson and I'm in Western Kansas. For those of you that kind of know the Kansas area, I'm halfway between Kansas City and Denver on the interstate. And I'm on the farther west side of my watershed. And as I mentioned in the narrative there, it is 2,400 square miles that drains into Canopolis Reservoir. So a state initiative that came out in state fiscal year 2019 was what was known as the Kansas Reservoir Protection Initiative, or KRPI. It was established with legislative appropriation and it is still current. We just had another allocation that took effective July 1st. And annually, the allocation's been from $550,000 to $900,000 a year Ultimately, the goal for the project was sediment reduction above federal reservoirs. So there are 4 federal reservoirs that were selected in the state. One of those happens to be mine, which is Canopolis, Tuttle Creek, John Redmond, and Fall River. And here is the map of the state kind of showing you where those 4 watersheds are. So the focus of this initiative through the state, Kansas Water Office, and the Department of Ag through the Division of Conservation, along with the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. And then obviously my role as a watershed specialist through Kansas State University was looking at ways to reduce sediment. So we all know, looking at BMPs, best management practices, there are many options, but for sediment reduction, the 4 major ones that producers, landowners are eligible for are cover crops, no-till, critical area plantings, and grassed waterways. Behind those last 3, you'll see what we call a sediment reduction incentive. And it's kind of creative and innovative on how we're paying for that in comparison to how we pay for cover crops, and I'll get to that in a second. So I mentioned some of the partners on the KRPI. The legislature, of course, is the funding tool, the Water Office, and then we have in the state of Kansas what we call regional advisory committees, and they're based on different areas of the state. And those are individuals that volunteer. They could be people that represent private business, farmers. They could represent an agency, but they serve as advisory members to the Water Office. The Department of Ag, which is Division of Conservation, and local conservation district offices and boards, they are the group. They partner with us, or we partner with them, however you look at it. But that's where the producer goes in, signs up, makes the application, is through the local conservation district office. Then obviously the Department of Health and Environment, and then our watershed restoration and protection strategies groups, which I fall in under Kansas State University. So this is my watershed. And you can see in the bottom part of it, the location in the state that covers 2,400 square miles. The very bottom right hand, you'll see the reservoir. So sediment and nutrients are one of the biggest issues we have in Canopolis. So this initiative, looking at sediment reduction, has been a good thing if we could just get a few more producers to sign up and want to participate. And in the watershed, this is the targeted area, basically from the lake. And in this initiative, we are looking at Russell County on the top left, and then Ellsworth County is where the lake is, and then a little section of Barton County there where you see those little yellow fingers that come down. And basically that targeted area has been identified through our RAPS group and the Department of Health and Environment within a half mile or a mile of Big Creek, the Smoky Hill River, or a major tributary. So those producers, landowners living in that and operating ground in that area is who's eligible for this initiative in our watershed. And it's the same way across the other watershed groups across the state for this initiative. So we focus on load reductions for the sediment and nutrients, and producers, they can be first to the project. They've never participated in these. They can also reapply for additional acres. So either way we look at it, if there are producers that are already participating, possibly in cover crops, and they're coming in and applying for new acres, then we're going to see additional load reduction. And hopefully, big picture is we bring new producers in, especially in the cover crops, no-till area, so that we can have cover and a living root on the ground more days out of the year than we currently have. So this project is definitely innovative and non-traditional. It's very collaborative across the local side all the way up to the state side. And the payments are based on performance of load reductions. And then again, we have state and local partners. So to date, there's been $2,152,133 in approved contracts or paid contracts. Of the 551 contracts that we have, 428 of those are in cover crops, which is 77% of our contracts. The other 123 contracts fall on the sediment reduction initiatives or incentives, which were the grassed waterways, the no-till, or the critical area planting along those targeted areas. So cover crop payments, these may be similar in your states as well. Year one, they get $45 an acre. Year two, they get $30 an acre. And in year three, they get $15 an acre. When we look at that sediment reduction incentive, it's a little different. Instead of paying per acre, we're paying $50 per ton of load reduction on those practices. So it's a little different. Many producers, when they come into offices, they get paid so much per acre to put in a grass waterway or to convert to no-till. This one is based on the actual load reduction, and we're paying $50 a ton so that we can see some sediment reduction on the ground and ultimately reduction in the reservoirs. I went quickly because there's a lot to talk about. And again, I don't want to run anyone short on questions and answers. There is my website if you want more information on what we do, but this Kansas Reservoir Protection Initiative has been very beneficial, and we're starting for the fourth year in the watersheds that have been targeted. So we look forward to seeing more producers sign up and continuing to have the projects that we have.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Stacey. I am very pleased to say, lots of time for questions and answers. So let's get right to them. I believe that the first questions I'm going to be asking are specifically addressed to Eric, but I'm not certain. They seem to materialize while Eric was speaking. So let's hit those first. Also note that Paul has been answering some questions in writing. If we have time, I will still read those for the benefit of those who have not seen the writing, and so that those replies are recorded as well. So first off, Bradford asks, does the forested buffer program allow for timber harvesting? And you are muted, Eric. So
there we go. I think I unmuted. So what we do with the what we call our water quality incentives program is it's really incentivizing enrollment into the federal conservation reserve enhancement program, and we don't put additional requirements on top of that as long as the producer signs up for a couple particular practices that we prioritize: the forested riparian buffer and wetland restoration. So whatever the requirements are of the Conservation Reserve Enhancement Program would be applicable to the person who is enrolled in our water quality incentives program.
great. Thanks. Thanks, Eric. Emily asks, well, first off, Emily expresses gratitude at having heard about H2 Ohio again. And then she says, I see project implementation costs were prioritized in the funding allocation. I think that's a great move towards sustainability and equity for nature and people. I'm wondering how much of the 64.5 million covered total project implementation costs. Was it enough to cover, or were more funds needed or will be needed?
Yeah, so that 64.5 million represents the cost to complete nearly all of those projects that I mentioned. We do have, I would say, 3 or 4, less than a handful of projects that we've funded where we've only funded the design and engineering phase of the project. But the bulk of what we're looking at are design build projects, and we'll realize with this money a finished product. When we look at what we need to do to achieve our nutrient reduction goals, the 64.5 million, the 59 projects, we're about a third of where we want to be with the Ohio Department of Natural Resources H2 Ohio implementation. So this is an ongoing initiative, and we look forward to several more rounds of project implementation from our department.
Great, thanks. Hold on a second. I need to scroll because new questions are bumping the old questions off the screen. Scott asks, Eric, are you concerned that these specific wetlands will have to comply with water quality standards? They will be filtering nutrients and sediment, ellipsis.
Yeah, so we have been very careful with our wetland projects to make sure this is voluntary restoration, and we have not intermingled our program with regulatory wetland programs. So, you know, where there would be very specific requirements on like a mitigation wetland or something along those lines, we're dealing with a different animal with our wetland restoration.
Great, thanks. Elaine asks of Stacey, what benefit does sediment load reduction have on nutrient loading in Kansas?
I am trying to get an answer because I don't see those total load reductions. I sent an email to my counterparts that actually run this program, so hopefully we can come back to that one. It is definitely helping on load reduction. I just can't give you a total how many tons that we have at this point for the project, because again, I'm one of the ones out in the watersheds doing it. And this is actually, year 3 was the first time I actually had producers and landowners participate in the program. So even though we'd promoted it, we'd held meetings and we'd shared, it just took my group a little longer to engage with it.
Sure. And I could, in a very general sense, I could say that a lot of the nutrients that are carried to the water are carried chemically attached to sediment particles. So while I certainly can't answer specific quantitative questions related to Kansas, there's at least that general concept. So reducing sediment loads tend to reduce nutrient loads hand in hand. Elaine follows up, is Kansas doing anything about nitrate pollution in private wells?
Luckily, I guess for me, my role is tied to surface water. So on the groundwater and private wells, I don't know specifically. I think our local environmental protection group does do that portion. And those individuals are across the state in different areas. As a watershed specialist and tied to extension, we still promote private well testing, knowing what's in your wells, doing an annual well testing every year, the same time of the year, so you can have comparison data. So I think there's an educational component to it, but I don't know if there's any great push statewide besides having staff out in the state that homeowners, landowners, farmers can do something with.
Great, thank you. Kelsey asks, Stacey, your funding models are great. Did you consider other options? And if so, what made you decide to use per acre for cover crops and per ton for other sediment practices rather than another payment system?
So again, I'm not the one in charge of this at the state level. I'm just one of the ones that are helping implement it. But from what I think I know from previous conversations and meetings that we've had on this, basically, when we looked at other funding mechanisms, whether it was through the Department of Conservation or through NRCS, those were made as flat rate payments or cost share payments. And so in order to do something different, it was kind of thinking outside of the box. And so that's why on some of this, it was per acre. Now on cover crops, that is how NRCS does pay a lot of times. And I think through conservation districts here in the state of Kansas. But when it comes to the ton per sediment, it was just a way to maybe bring some people in that maybe hadn't participated, or to change it so that we're doing incentives for rewarding producers and landowners for doing water quality initiative work instead of just doing a flat rate or a cost share side of it.
Excellent. Thank you, Stacey. Maya asks of Eric, who is doing the wetland monitoring, universities, consultants, or ODNR? And before you answer that, Eric, I'm going to append that with something that appeared in the chat from Corrine. She says, how are you paying for the monitoring and coordination of the monitoring? Those seem related enough that they seem lumpable.
Yeah, we can bundle those two together. Yeah, so this was something we thought hard about at the beginning of our H2 Ohio program and the wetland restoration work that we were doing. We wanted to know how are these systems performing, and to be able to compare them on an apples to apples basis. So we contemplated, do we build our own internal monitoring program at ODNR? I think we quickly realized that we didn't have the resources to be able to pull that off with the staff that we had on hand. And then we thought about, do we lean on consultants to do this? But then we were worried that if we did that, we would have a bunch of different monitoring processes that we wouldn't really get an apples to apples comparison at the end of the day. So we decided to take it on ourselves to work with a academic consortium, the Lake Erie and Aquatic Research Network, and we put together a contract with them to develop the program and implement the program. So it's a group of 6 universities in northern and northwest Ohio. We've got somewhere near a dozen researchers who are kind of the lead implementers on that monitoring program, and then they have their own staff and students that they're engaging in this process. I think that maybe answers the question.
I think so. I was actually the assistant director of the precursor of the Learn Network.
Okay.
Way back when my beard was at least a little less gray. Although I kind of emerged from the womb with a gray beard, so only a little less gray. So, moving on. Michael asked, Eric, how much nutrient reduction is projected from your wetland projects? Be interesting to see the dashboard show pounds of predicted nutrient reduction versus actual as your cooperators begin to collect data.
Very much so. Yeah, we so far have paid $4.3 million to our monitoring program to be able to tell me exactly how wrong I am with my projections that I've made. So, we take a fairly simple approach to projecting the nutrient reduction capacity of each one of our projects, and we prioritize project implementation based on that. When we got to the end of the first biennium, we had 26 of those 59 projects in place. I crunched the numbers at that point, and we were at projecting around 35 metric tons of phosphorus per year from that set of projects. Now we've added almost double that amount of projects at this point. I don't have an up-to-date number on what our grand total is at this moment, but we are tracking that on a project-by-project basis, and we'll let you know exactly how wrong we are on each one of these projects.
Great. Hopefully, if you're wrong in the good way.
Right.
Emily asks, hi, Stacey. Really awesome to hear about the good work going on in Kansas. I'm turning in from Wisconsin, and I'm not super familiar with cover crop payments in Kansas. Is the $1 per acre rate enough for farmers to finish installing cover crops, or do they need more money?
Well, a couple things. I'll talk specifically in my watershed on my cover crop policy. We're calling it cover crop / vegetation best management practice, because for some cover crops is maybe a scary term for them. So we want to call it vegetation so that we're having cover on more days than fallow on ground. And we pay $35 per acre per year for up to 3 years. So over the life of the contract, they're going to get $105. This project ends up being $90 if I'm adding that quickly. And the differences on different cost share programs, whether it's coming through the Division of Conservation or NRCS, also depends on the number of species for us, specifically in the watershed. And I think on this program, they have to have a minimum of 3 species. So we're not just going to pay for 1 species for load reduction. I know some of the cost share programs require 5 species. So it just depends. But for my area, if a producer is getting $35 an acre, and in this KRPI, $45 an acre, that should sufficiently pay for the seed for them to put out there. The other thing for us, we also can pay for a water supply. So if they're wanting to put cover crops out and help with grazing purposes through the watershed project, we can offer the putting a well or tire tanks or something out there. So it makes it beneficial if they want to put the cover crops out there to graze the cattle and they don't have to haul water.
Great. Thanks so much, Stacey. Now, Paul, I know you've answered some questions live, but do you mind replying to those verbally just so we have the recording captured?
Right.
Fantastic. That said, I will just read them to you. Andrew has asked, does the Clean Water Fund support, it says support with private well owners. I think it means support private well owners.
Yes, in a very selective way. So there are certain parts of the state where private and public wells are especially vulnerable to contamination from nitrogen and other contaminants. That includes the southeastern part of the state, the driftless area with karst geology, which is very porous, as well as the central sands part of the state, which is north central part of the state. The Department of Agriculture has done a lot of aggressive testing in those townships, and that has helped coordinate with other agencies that monitor our groundwater to see where our vulnerability is. So there's been a lot of aggressive work there. We don't have a systematic thing for everybody. The Department of Health also gets funding from the Clean Water Fund to support education wherever they operate on private well testing. There are groups like the Minnesota Well Owners Association, which is made up of advocates who have run well testing clinics of their own, and we get in touch with them quite a bit. Just to get people to test is a little harder than you'd think. They test for, we're looking for 4 or 5 different contaminants, and then the health department provides guidance to people on what they should do if they find something. But the idea that private wells, private property still reigns supreme, and so there isn't any compulsion that we test everybody.
Great, thanks, Paul. Lynn has asked, Paul, what is the name of the program that works with farmers and agriculture for clean water?
Thanks, Lynn. That's the Minnesota Agricultural Water Quality Certification Program. That is a program that is actually fairly rigorous. It allows farmers to be certified, they get a sign and recognition, but they are able to work directly with someone who can do some engagement on, essentially someone comes out to do an audit, usually an SWCD, to point out areas where they can improve things and have best management practices for water quality. The landowner is given a contract essentially, or an agreement that says, okay, if you do these things, you will be certified. And if we find 3 years from now that you're not doing them, then we can take it away. So it is pretty rigorous. And I want to say there are about 1,100 farmers right now that are enrolled in that program. We have 69,000 farmers in Minnesota. And the Governor Walz has set a goal of 1 million acres being enrolled by the end of 2022. There are certainly farmers doing good things for water quality that aren't in the program. And that is fine. There are other ways that the state and local entities engage with farmers, but it's a good proxy, that program, for who's doing the best that they can. You can get these little endorsements if you do a little bit of extra stuff on soil health, for example. But it's a great program, and it's allowed us to leverage about an equal amount of money from the federal government for money that goes direct to projects with those farmers enrolled in the program, or that will soon be enrolled in the program. And of course, we offer them not just the technical assistance, but the financial assistance, the ability of the Clean Water Fund to help let people know that there's money available is pretty great.
Great, thanks so much, Paul. Now I see that you've been typing, Stacey, but I'm going to reiterate just for the benefit of recording. Both John and Corrine kind of asked the same thing, but phrased it slightly differently. So John asked, Stacey, how are you calculating the sediment reduction per ton reduction? And Corrine similarly asks, what tool do you use to measure reduction?
Okay, can I share my screen?
Sure, give me a moment. You should be able to now.
Okay, let's see, what screen are you seeing?
I'm seeing an Excel sheet.
Okay, that's the one I want you to see then. Okay, so this is calculated for each county that the KRPI area is in. And it's based on the number of acres and the tons per year. And it's by the grass buffers or waterways, the cover crops, terraces. And the last few years, I think the only thing that's really been funded were grass waterways, even though there is a load reduction calculated for terraces. And then that permanent vegetation. And there's, if you look at the very bottom, you'll see that there's an option for the different counties. And so this is how it's calculated when a producer comes in and signs in. We're not only looking at the sediment reduction, we're also looking at the nitrogen and the phosphorus reduction collectively for the whole practice that the producer is applying for. So you can see the payments and how many pounds, depending upon the acres for each, for the sediment and the phosphorus and the nitrogen. And then when this is being done through EPA Region 5's tool, is how they're calculating the load reductions. And I sent one link for some of the information, and you can see, I'll see if I can. Let me see if I can share again. Maybe.
You'll probably need to stop your sharing and then reshare.
Okay.
Now I'm seeing a large picture that I assume is family.
Yep, and I can't get my other one to come in here to let me share. But that website shows one of them, and I'll try and find the other link to put the other one on. So if people are interested in looking at the sign up material, however, we've done the things from press releases to media. And what we're doing on this initiative, we're doing a direct mail to everyone that lives in that targeted area on that map I showed. So there'll be close to a little over 700 postcards that are ready to go out saying, do you live in this area with the map? And then it says you could be eligible for sediment reduction for cover crops, critical area plantings, no-till, and grassed waterways, versus them thinking it's for everything, whether it's a livestock project or an overall type of project. It's narrowed down so that when they call myself or the conservation district offices, we've told them what eligible practices they might be eligible for, to save some calls and frustration when they call in and say, oh, I need to fix a well, but I can't. We can say, well, these are the only practices that are technically eligible at this point because we want it for sediment and the nutrients at the same time.
Great. If there is a link that you'd like to share, Stacey, I might suggest that copying that to the chat function is
Okay.
a good way to share that.
Okay, I can do that.
While you're thinking of the copying, well, first off, please remember to unshare your screen. And
Well,
while you're And while you're doing so, contemplate this, asked by Maya. She asked, is the spreadsheet step L? And I don't know, for those who aren't familiar, step L is the spreadsheet tool for estimating pollutant loads that is circulated by the US EPA.
I have no idea. I'll be honest with you. And I'm really struggling trying to get this screen to let me
Up top, there should be a red button that says stop.
finally.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that is over my pay grade. I will be honest with you on that question. But it looks like KDHE staff said, no, it is not a step L.
Okay, great. Thank you. That said, I see no more questions in our question and answer box. And it is approaching 4 p.m. Central. I'm sorry, 3 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Eastern. So we'll wrap. I think it's been a great discussion. I really thank especially our panelists for sharing their expertise. And I thank our participants for engaging in lively discussion. If you have any remaining burning questions that you didn't get addressed here, note that you will see the contact information for all of our speakers on the screen. Please feel free to use that and drop a line. You will note also that thanks and accolades are arriving in the chat, so check those out, speakers. And again, thank you to you all. We want to thank all of you for participating in the current webinar series today. Thank you to all our speakers for taking the time to share your knowledge. This webinar was recorded, and the recording and the PowerPoint slides will be available at northcentralwater.org. Please feel free to share that information with any who are interested but not able to join us today. Before we leave, I want to make you aware of an upcoming webinar from the North Central Region Water Network Soil Health Team, the Soil Health Nexus. The Soil Health Nexus will be hosting an informal webinar through their Digital Cafe series coming up Wednesday, August 18th at 2 p.m. Central Time, focusing on answering the question, do soil health tests match farmers' experiences? Be sure to register for that if that's of interest to you. You can find information at soilhealthnexus.org. Thank you so much for your time today. I've enjoyed the conversation. I hope you did as well. And I hope to see you at more of these webinars in the future. Thank you so much.
Thanks.